Hi, I'm Mike Papantonio, and this is America's Lawyer. The United States and Germany are now escalating the conflict in Ukraine by sending tanks to the country. We'll talk about how disastrous that can be in just a minute. A Republican senator has introduced a bill called the Pelosi Act that would ban members of Congress from owning and selling stocks. Insider trading is what they're trying to stop. And Democrats, well, they're growing more concerned about Biden's age as he prepares to announce his 2024 plans. All that and more, it's coming up. Don't go anywhere. America's Lawyer starts right now. American and German tanks are now headed to the Ukraine, a sign that this conflict is going to escalate without question in a very dangerous way. Ring of Fire's Farron Cousin joins me to talk about this. Farron, you know, MSNBC, CNN, they're high-fiving. Oh, this is great. We're sending in more tanks. And then Zelensky, we just talked about, now says, well, I don't just want your tanks. I want some long-range bombers, basically saying we're going to go bomb Moscow. And Biden, oh, Jesus Christ, it's almost like he's asleep at the wheel as this thing creeps towards World War III.
We're at the point now where we've got pretty much all of the NATO countries that are sending tanks to Ukraine. U.S. and Germany were kind of the last holdouts. So now we've joined in. We're sending them heavy artillery. And the day, as you pointed out, the day after this was announced, we're going to send planes. Zelensky came out and said, next I will be asking for warplanes. So this is not going away. This is getting worse.
He wants long-range bombers.
Yeah.
Because he's going to say, well, by God, we're going to start a war with Moscow. We're going to go to Moscow. We're going to bomb them. And it's almost as if they have put Biden in a stupid room, okay? Biden is sitting there, 80 years old, in his stupid room. And all these war hawks are saying, do this, do that. He comes out and says, I'm doing everything I can to avoid World War III. That was his talking point. There will not be a World War III. This thing is escalating at a pace where anybody watching this who says, you just don't understand. No, I friggin' understand. I've seen it before, but not on this scale.
Right.
This is scary as hell to me, I'll tell you.
It is. And look, everybody, we understand Russia was the aggressor here. Russia started this. Ukraine was the victim. We're not trying to downplay any of that. But the point here is that we're a hair's breadth away from putting boots on the ground, because Ukraine has already said, hey, it's probably going to take us several months to even learn how to use these tanks.
It's going to take a year, Farron.
Which means we're going to end up sending our guys to go over there and train them, which at that point, we have boots on the ground.
They can't drive them. And the experts say it'll be a year before they can. They can't fix them. They can't repair them. There's nothing they can do with these other than the fact to poke the bear a little bit more and then have this idiot, Zelensky, who I think we have made him into a hero, and the guy is not a hero.
Well, and one of the, a great anti-war activist, the name escapes me at the moment, but I'm sorry, they pointed out, this is exactly Vietnam.
Of course
this is Vietnam. This is what we did.
Of course.
Slowly marching and then quicker marching, and then suddenly we're there and we have no idea what we're doing, why we're doing it. And we're heading back into that same quagmire.
You know what, really, if people understand how this started, most people don't even understand how it started. I swear to God, if you ask 10 people what brought this about, they have no idea. All they know is Russia invaded Ukraine. Russia, the aggressor, comes in Ukraine. Look at the history. It was all about NATO. Putin was telling Obama, even back in the Obama administration, he said a couple things. This deal that we have where you can't move missiles any closer to our boundaries, you going to stick with it? He didn't stick with it. Obama moves them closer. The next discussion is don't go bringing all these people into NATO when they're right at our border, because you're surrounding us right now. The worst thing about this, 26 million Russians died in World War II at the hands of Germans, okay? Hitler's Nazis killed 26 million Russian soldiers. No, people, civilian soldiers, everybody. Yeah. So Russia is looking at this, well, it's Germany again. And now Germany is latched on to the United States. This is so scary to me, Farron. I just don't know why people just, this thing, oh, well, it's the right thing to do. Really?
No, the right thing to do is a diplomatic solution to this.
course.
But listen to this, okay? You've got, this is the advisor to the Ukrainian president, Mikhailo Podolyak, who says internal escalation of war in Russia is inevitable. Cities that are pampered, lazy, that thought they lived in a different reality, such as Moscow, St. Petersburg, will be subject to strikes. Various blows will be dealt to various targets. Why, by whom, and what for? That's another question. You're now threatening to bomb Russian cities. Those Russian citizens, they're not a part of this. They're innocent bystanders too. And they're threatening it right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even want to hear, well, you don't understand. No, I frigging understand. I have followed this since the minute it started. Most people don't understand what even started it. They don't understand the connection to NATO. They don't understand that even Zelensky was saying, hush, hush about NATO, because all you're doing is you're aggravating Russia and you're turning up that heat. And ultimately, that's what happened. Biden let it happen, Obama let it happen, Trump let it happen. And now this is where we are, and we are this close. What was it, 90 seconds? What are we
90 seconds on the doomsday clock.
Doomsday. Yeah. Well, what great timing. What does that put us around April or May? Republican Senator Josh Hawley has introduced a bill called the Pelosi Act to bar members of Congress from owning stock. Really what it's about is we have Congress has been, they've had this free ride to engage in insider trading. Pelosi, expert, her old man has made like millions and millions trading on inside information that came directly from the information that she had. Pick it up.
Yeah, exactly. So Hawley, he tries to take a shot at Pelosi by naming it the Pelosi Act. But in reality, it's actually a good bill. I give him full credit for that. We have to ban the trading of stocks. You and I have stood here and we have talked. We've gone through the full list of the Republicans and the Democrats that are doing this. And obviously, Pelosi is one of the most visible people, but it's a bipartisan thing. They're all doing it. And when they get caught, the worst that can happen is they have to pay a $200 fine.
$200 fine.
Like, that's the penalty for insider trading.
Okay, let me tell you how crazy it is. If a congressman is in committee and they are engaged in an investigation that's closed door, they're taking like the chip. Let's talk about the chip. This is, this was, everybody found out about it finally, but this is where you had Pelosi's husband that was taking this information and trading on it because he knew that government was getting ready to put a ton of money into that business, right?
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly what happened. The government wanted computer chips made here in the United States. Paul Pelosi owned stock in offshore computer chip manufacturers. He finds out about this. He dumps all that stock. A couple days later, Congress announces what they're going to do. It's no different. And we also see it, one, with the defense industry, huge.
Oh, good God.
Because they know, okay, we've got this budget here that is not yet public. We know $20 billion is going to Raytheon, $80 billion is going to Northrop Grumman. So I'm going to go buy these stocks now because they're going to go through the roof when the budget's announced.
Okay, so one way they get information is at the hearings.
Yeah.
Okay, they're there. They're engaged in the hearings. The other way they get the information is from the lobbyists who are telling them, this is the amount of money we're putting to push into this, okay? They kind of get it at that point. All their pals are there on K Street. And they come off of K Street and said, we're really going to push this one. Well, okay, well, I guess it's time for me to invest. Nobody goes to jail. The average American citizen, if they did that, even the dysfunctional Department of Justice would go after that person. But they let them go with a $200 fine.
If they even enact the fine, which they very rarely do, even when it is so blatant that this is taking place.
Jesus. New reports found that eating a single freshwater fish is the same as drinking dangerous PFAS chemicals. Okay, first of all, most people don't know what PFAS is. Do you agree with that?
Oh,
absolutely. It's been knocking around out there. We tried the first time PFAS ever got into the public domain were the trials that I had up in West Virginia. They made 2 movies out of it. One was called The Devil We Know. It's on Netflix. The other one was about the lawyer who brought the case to me, brilliant lawyer, named Rob Bilott. It's called Dark Waters. Begin by watching those movies to understand how bad this is. Okay, PFAS is so dangerous that if you take one drop, put it in an Olympic-sized pool, it's going to have the propensity to cause the physical problems that we're talking about, which are what?
We're talking about neurological problems, cancers of every imaginable kind for the individuals, birth defects. And the big problem here too, and you've discussed this plenty of times, is that it's bioaccumulative, which means once it gets in you, it's in you. So every PFAS chemical you drink after that is just compiling and building up inside your system.
And explain why it's in fish. Explain why it's in our drinking water. Talk about
exactly. It's the waste from these massive corporations that have been dumping it for decades. Yeah. Our EPA right now still doesn't know exactly if we're going to stop this because it's still happening. They're still debating on what the proper limits are, but there's no limit.
50 years. 50 years. The EPA has known that PFAS, the first cases we tried were C8. It was a type of PFAS. So we found the documents. The EPA understood that all of the rat studies were a disaster. All of the beagle studies, they all died. All the monkey studies, they all died. And it was caused by this stuff that is in our drinking water right now. The second phase of this case that we're handling right now is all these drinking water facilities, the delivery facilities. They have so much PFAS in the water, it would take $100 to $200 million per facility to get it out of the water.
And so now what we're looking at, this new study from the Environmental Working Group says one freshwater fish, just one, if you were to eat that right now for lunch, that's the equivalent of drinking nothing but PFAS basically for an entire month, one fish. And these freshwater fish they're talking about, these supply foods to communities. They're a huge source of food for low-income Americans who always bear the brunt of all of these environmental toxins, native populations, all of these groups heavily dependent on these fish. And we're finding out now we're poisoning you even faster than the rest of us are being poisoned because everybody's getting it, but they're getting it worse.
You want to know how it happened? You know what came out in the trial? Okay, it's 3M and DuPont were the big folks in this. They did all this testing. They saw that all the tests were a disaster, causing kidney cancer, causing testicular cancer, causing neurological problems, causing birth defects, all of this information they had. Now, for a little while, they hid it from the EPA, but then at some point, they handed it over to the EPA. EPA did nothing. There was nothing that was done by the EPA. All right. Working groups, environmental working groups, gave it to the media. Don't you think this was 40 years ago? Don't you think this is an important story, New York Times? Don't you think this is important,
it should be.
Washington Post? No, it wasn't, because obviously advertising money was moving into those entities. Television wouldn't do it. 3M, check your TVs. 3M advertises like crazy people. So even the so-called investigative corporate types weren't doing anything on this project. Then regulators, we found out that the regulators that were supposed to be in charge of all this were moving from being regulators to going to work for 3M in $1 million jobs, or DuPont going to work, going from regulation to DuPont. It was this revolving door, and it went the other way. People who worked for the industry they were putting people in administrative positions with the EPA to slow it all down. And Farron, I swear to God, if you say, isn't that PFAS a problem to 10 people? If you get one of them to even understand it's in their body, it's in their drinking water, they don't get it.
No, it's what is it? At least 98% of all life on Earth at this point has PFAS chemicals in it.
Polar bears have it. It's so bad that they had to find blood that they could do epidemiology studies with. They couldn't find it with contemporaries. They had to go to the soldiers that were in Korea to look at their blood samples to even be able to compare because they didn't have it in their blood because it hadn't started then. Pfizer's spending big money to control online media. Boy, they have succeeded, haven't they? Talk about this, would you?
This is an amazing story by this group, Lever News, Andrew Perez. And by the way, Lever News is actually emerging as a very good anti-corporate news source here. But
tell the viewers about that so they'll have a source to go to.
Yeah, it's levernews.com. Again, huge. David Sirota writes for it. Andrew Perez, a lot of folks, we've talked about over the years. But what they've found here, they've been doing the digging, and they've found that Pfizer is out here sponsoring all kinds of different online media outlets. They've got a event coming up this week that they're sponsoring for The Hill. And what they're doing is paying to have their articles, in addition to the big money behind it, go out there to the public saying, oh, look at what a good company Pfizer is, as they do every January, raising the prices on hundreds of prescription drugs in America simply because they can. But they've got these articles out here that they paid for saying, we give so much money to charity. We're on the forefront of cutting edge medical technology. It's a sham, and they're paying for it.
Let me tell you, it's really weird. They write the articles.
Yeah.
They do the television production. They give it to MSNBC. They give it to CNN. They give it to the corporate networks, and they just run it. Why? Because Pfizer is advertising every 9 minutes on MSNBC or CNN. Yeah. So they just take this packaged crap that's produced by Pfizer, and it's all, well, we're a wonderful corporation. They don't talk about the hundreds of lawsuits that have been brought against them for fraud, for creating dangerous drugs. They don't talk about any of that. They say, okay, if you said it, it must be true. And oh, by the way, could you spend another $10 million with us this year advertising Pfizer?
And what we see now, because you're talking a lot about the corporate media, which they've been in for years, and now they've realized we've seen the success on the corporate media, on the daytime television especially, it's bad. And now they're moving into those online forums, right, where they couldn't get in front of people's eyeballs the same way they do on TV. So they buy spots, and oil industry is bad with this too. They buy them on The Hill, thehill.com. They buy it in Politico. Politico is horrible with the corporate propaganda they push out.
Give us money, we'll say whatever you want to say.
And now this new one, Semaphore, which I've used them as a source. They've put out some good stuff. And Pfizer understands, they're talking about pharmaceutical stuff. We've got to put a stop to it. We've got to buy them off.
I wouldn't use that as a source. I literally would not use it as a source. I wonder about any of these other sources that are doing this, because all they're doing is they're going to package. Would you do this story? We filmed it for you. We have the witnesses. We have whatever. Just put it up. Everything's going to be okay. Now, the problem, as you're talking about, is it moves into social media. What ends up happening, those stories are throttled up, okay? Yep. Our story about this will be throttled back. When you're watching this segment, don't be surprised if a drug company comes on right before our segment. Every time we do a story about the Next Era, for example, the energy supply company, they're right before we start hammering in them. So I mean, social media in another year, you're not even going to recognize it, man. You're not even going to recognize it because they're just being bought up the same way corporate media has been bought up.
It's just that the corporations are a little bit behind where they were with corporate media. And now that they see the corporate media is dying, you got people dropping satellite TV left and right. Man. Exactly. So they're like, okay, we got to move into this online. We got to be on Twitter. We got to be on Facebook. We've got to buy the actual website coverage. And that's what they're doing.
Farron, I looked at one of your stories the other day. You were doing it. It was something to do with something Trump had done. It was a powerful story. But then off to the side of it, there were stories completely unrelated to anything you were doing. Okay? Yeah. There were supposed to be, those stories over on the right of the page are supposed to be somehow connected to the topic. MSNBC comes up talking about some nonsense story, probably has been fed to them by Pfizer. CNN, just look down the list. There are not independent sources. Are you going to see Sam Seder? Are you going to see David Pakman? Are you going to see any of these any of these sources that are independent media anymore, because corporate media is coming in. They've destroyed corporate television. Now they're coming in to destroy corporate, corporate internet.
And they're making huge headway with it too. I mean, across the board on the progressive side of the independent media, hosts out there on YouTube are getting hammered by this, and most of it has to do with what you're talking about. They're no longer showing up in that suggested feed. Because you like David Pakman, we should show you a bunch of David Pakman or similar videos, but instead we're going to send you to ABC, NBC, Fox, whatever it is.
What people don't understand about what this station does, we'll get these things. They'll get mad about me doing a story on something and, call me a right-winger or say that you're a crazy lefter. And so we're unsubscribing. They don't understand that doesn't affect us because the way that our money comes in has nothing to do with it. But these other folks that are relying on those advertising dollars coming in, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Especially when you've got somebody at the wheel like Twitter or Facebook that's throttling them back to create more space for MSNBC and CNN.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Julian Assange is still facing extradition and charges of violating the Espionage Act for exposing the U.S. military's war crimes. This story has always bothered me so badly because, the people love to, he's a criminal, he did these terrible things, he raped a girl, which proved to be completely nonsense. Yeah. That was years ago, and they said, no, he didn't. As a matter of fact, that was created by the spook industry. The spook industry created that story to discredit him. Pick this up and how dangerous the Espionage Act is and how if they use it against him, we're in big trouble.
Yeah, we are. Listen, people love him or hate him. It doesn't matter your personal feelings about him at all. What we're talking about here is journalism itself at risk. And Julian Assange is currently facing extradition to the United States. They want to charge him under the Espionage Act, which could put him in prison forever until he dies. And the Espionage Act is not supposed to be for whistleblowers exposing problems with our own U.S. military.
But that's 100% of what they're doing.
Yes, it is. And that's what we're hearing from past whistleblowers. Daniel Ellsberg has now had to come out. Noam Chomsky is coming out, and they are sounding the alarm bells about what could happen should Assange come over here and be convicted, because that is going to be the death blow for what's left of journalism in this country.
Howard Zinn was talking about this his entire career. He said this is getting ready to happen. He even described what the legislation would look like. It looked like the Espionage Act. Now let's talk about these horrible things he did. First, he disclosed that the feds were spying on U.S. citizens. That's one of the bad things he did. The other thing he did is he was the first to disclose that dozens of purely dirty tricks by the U.S. were being pulled off all around the globe, and he pointed them out. He said, this is what happened in this country, this is what happened in this country. Here are the people that were responsible. That's another terrible thing he did. The other thing he did is he was the first to disclose the remarkable impact that the feds were having on controlling the media. So the media attacked him. They didn't like that. That's terrible. How dare you do that? He was first to disclose the indiscriminate use of drone bombs that were killing civilians. Yeah. God, what a criminal he is, Let's put him in prison. He was the first to disclose the details about George Bush and Dick Cheney and how they lied and hustled us into the Iraq War. Sounds like a criminal to me, doesn't he? I can't even get my arms around it. And Biden comes out and says, one of the first things Biden's big thing, this is a quote from him. Our freedom is dependent on free, unregulated information flowing through the press, right?
Yeah. And they will not drop the charges. They want him to come and stand trial. And the charges were actually brought by the Trump administration, the Trump DOJ, after Trump had kind of made it seem like he wasn't going to do anything. We were going to forgive him or whatever. And then, nope, they move forward full steam ahead. Biden has not reversed that course at all. And again, we're not talking about this man releasing, here's all these secrets the United States has.
These are the things I'm talking about. This is what he released.
He's talking about, here are some war crimes that we've committed. Yeah. Here are some other atrocities that our government is committing by manipulating the media. Yeah. These are things the public needs to know about. 40 years ago, he'd have been a hero, much like Daniel Ellsberg. But now public enemy number one for both the right and the left, depending on where you are that day. But this is an attack on journalism itself.
It is. And you know, the problem, Farron, you and I talk about this all the time. If investigative journalism is dead, which it is, tell me the last time you saw a CNN investigative report that meant anything, that wasn't driven by corporate. It's dead. I mean, you can't find investigative journalism unless you look at independent media like the sources that we rely on. So it's dead. The Espionage Act would have had Daniel Ellsberg in prison to this day. He'd still be in prison. We would never know that Richard Nixon was bombing Cambodia, completely contrary to what he should have been doing. We would have never known the truth about what was happening in Vietnam. We would have never known that whole thing was based on absolute lies. Daniel Ellsberg is the person that put that out there. Under this act, he would be in prison right now to this day.
Exactly, and that's what we have to be concerned about. I mean, hell, even Bernstein and Woodward, maybe they would have been in prison too for exposing Watergate at this point.
Think about it.
Because it's not just that journalism is dead, it's that the feds are trying to make it criminal. That's what it is.
But why isn't the New York Times, why aren't they locking up the New York Times or the Washington Post? They're disclosing this information. Yeah, they're saying, we're going to publish this. Yeah. Why aren't they part of the problem, you see? But it's easier to go after this guy and, make these stories about what a terror. The movie they made about it was atrocious. And then you find out, well, who funded the movie? Well, go follow that story. We want to do a story on that, tell the whole story about Ellsberg. But, the point is, it's Kafka. Franz Kafka had it right he wrote a great book called The Trial. Everybody should read it. I know you've read it. You're probably one of the most read political commentators I know. But everybody needs to understand that's what's happening here. It's Kafkian as we're watching this unfold, and nobody seems to give a damn. Even Nancy Pelosi thinks that President Biden's age is going to be a huge factor in 2024. This is a bigger story than her statement about Biden. You get that. I mean, she comes out and says, well, in her great-grandma kind of passive-aggressive way, she's master at the passive-aggressive great-grandma. She comes out and says, well, I'm 82, he's 80. Yeah, it could be a factor. And then she follows it up with this statement, well, I think there are other great candidates out there. I mean, come on. And then now you see all this thing about the document stories that are coming. Democrats are driving that story. I mean, they're the ones that are pushing the story because they want to get rid of the crazy old man.
It's funny you picked up on that exact same quote because to me, that's the story. It's not just her saying is age a positive? No, it's not for him. But then I think we have other great candidates when the time comes. So she is already, shifting into that I'll support him if he runs. But there's a lot of good other people over here. And the problem is actually, no, if we had all of those good other candidates you're talking about, we wouldn't be having a conversation about him maybe running in 2024. And I think that also weighs heavily on his mind. Because he understands, I don't even think he wants to do the second term.
I mean,
but he's looking around at his own party and saying, where are you,
they're going to put they're going to put him back. Well, there are some good candidates. Tell me.
Well, they are.
There's some good
you've
candidates.
Got Katie Porter, but I don't think she's there yet.
She's not ready, but what a great candidate, man.
2028,
Ro
100%.
Khanna, I mean,
Ro Khanna is great.
We got some great people out there.
Merkley is good,
but
they won't challenge
they're going to
him,
put him down in the basement again, okay? They're put him down, put the old man in the basement if he runs again, and let him run a campaign from there. But the truth is that most of these leaks of these stories, I mean, it's very clear. It's coming from the inside of the Democratic elites. They know this. They don't want him to run again. They've seen him. Think back with Obama. Do you remember when I was waiting for Obama to endorse him? Do you know he never did? He never endorsed him. I guess when it came right down to the end, but when in the primaries, he just sat silent. Because he knows the guy's, not right in a lot of ways.
Right. I mean, being his vice president for 8 years, you would have thought as soon as Biden announced, Obama would have been like, "Yep, that's the guy, folks. He's
Yeah.
my guy. We're
Yeah.
going to do this again."
Yeah.
And the fact that he didn't, he waited so long
Yeah.
before even saying anything about it. And the only reason he did was to, kind of kneecap Bernie Sanders' campaign,
right.
Because he had the wind at his back. But even Bernie Sanders, who would have been an amazing president,
Could have been great.
he's got that same age factor.
Yeah,
Although he doesn't look like he's missed a step in 40 years.
Yeah, you
but
can't recycle. You're not going to be able to recycle, which
Right.
is unfortunate. He could have done so much good in these last 4 years. So, anyway, Farron, thank you for joining me. Okay,
Thank you.
Appreciate it. That's all for this week. But all of these segments are going to be available this coming week right here on this channel, and you can follow us at Twitter at America's Lawyer. I'm Mike Papantonio, and this has been America's Lawyer, where every week we tell you the stories that corporate media won't tell you, because their advertisers don't allow for it, and their political connections are so tribal that does not permit them to tell the story. We'll see you next time.